Good morning. Happy Sunday. I just spent way too much time answering DMs because I type very slowly on my phone especially. So I am going to take my friend Simone's advice and do an Ask Me Anything series. So as a hypnotist change worker, I get a shit ton of questions, just from basic to advanced. I'm open to anything. So hit me up. I think this will be fun and it will save me from having to type, which I like. All right. Thanks for all the questions, guys. So I figure since there's so many, I'll just start with who asked first. So the benefits of using hypnosis in coaching. To me, it's funny because I never see these as separate things. To me, my coaching has always been hypnotic, and my hypnosis has always overlapped with what many people would consider coaching. So, but let's just talk about that, right? So, God, where to start? Because there's so many benefits. To me, one of the things that I had seen many, many years ago, before I even created Coaching the Unconscious Mind, was that I felt that some of the traditional coaching curriculums really focused on, the conscious mind, the conscious knowing. And yet, as a hypnotist, I know just how much the adaptive unconscious plays out in every single issue, every single decision we make is mediated through all of these unconscious filters. So to me, it just seemed like they were missing the big piece of what gets people, basically. So to know, just to kind of understand a little bit more about how the unconscious works, how habituated patterns are formed, is a crucial element in helping people to change, right? So at this point, as a change worker, it's kind of vital that we take the bigger picture into account. Nothing exists in a vacuum, including our problems. So knowing how to tap into that, knowing how to use language and communication in such a way as to be able to guide or influence and, even tease out some of the unconscious strategies people are running, right? So there's many layers to my work, and the first is kind of informing people on how the brain is doing what the brain is doing and how we can interrupt it, how we can start to rewire the brain. And most of this is outside of their conscious awareness, typically. Welcome to Broadway. So at every level of my work, I'm utilizing, hypnotic languaging, hypnotic principles, and then formal hypnosis to teach clients how to, access the state for themselves. There's something about bringing magic into your coaching practice, so there's the piece of, this is the way to get really long-lasting change, change the brain, change unconscious filters and biases and things like that. So there's that kind of practical side of utilizing hypnosis, or at least conversational hypnosis, or my form of hypnosis, which is not necessarily kind of traditional old school style. And then there's this other bit, right? This other piece, which I call, sprinkling kind of fairy dust all along your change work. And that is because, utilizing this kind of deeper trance brings magic in. It brings, the extraordinary into your sessions. So if people have been struggling with something for a really long time, and all of a sudden they experience something that is so outside of their normal reality, it kind of opens the door, right, for possibility, right? I've never done this before, right? It's not the same old, but also my style of hypnosis is really to show people how to get there on their own, as well as show them the magic of it. They can make a suggestion and even their body believes them, to show people the power of their own mind is kind of magical in and of itself. But to sprinkle that magic all along the change work, it's just, it works on many levels, right? Beliefs, expectation. Anyway, so to me, there's so many benefits that I could honestly talk about this for an hour, but then it wouldn't be a short little bite-sized piece. So I think I gave you enough for that, right? I mean, there's just, I could go on and on, but I'll stop there because I think you got enough. All right. Thanks for the questions. And, I'll just do, I don't know, 1 a day, 2 a day. I don't know. One of the other questions, what is this? I was going to stop. Maybe I'll just keep going, right? 5 minutes? Yeah, maybe. Do you use music in hypnosis? I used to. When I used to use binaural beats and music to synchronize the brain while I was doing sessions. That was a long time ago. Now that I work virtually, I don't use that, but I definitely use hypnosis to influence music or creativity outcomes, right? I work with a lot of artists. So I work with writers and, musicians and singers, and, teaching them to tap into their, creative flow is kind of key and crucial. And then sometimes teaching them to go into deep trances, and then from there, what kind of music emerges, right? So I've played with that, as well as, creating poetry from deep trance states, what just comes, as well as, opening that pipeline of creativity and showing people how to get back into it. So I think there's a lot, I have a lot of students that do amazing work, Kristen, who created Trance Poetics, right away. There's just so many people doing so much good work, utilizing hypnosis to tap into the creativity. So yeah, definitely. All right. Thanks, folks. And keep the questions coming. Okay. So it looks like Instagram has scrambled the order of the comments. So I'm just gonna take some ones that I've seen and go through it. So somebody asked about, the triune brain, right? And why, even though research is indicating it's no longer a valid theory of the brain, why do people still use it? And I can certainly answer this one, because it's hard to let go of something that feels right and explains so much about our personal behavior, human behavior as a whole, right? The triune brain, that was like, this idea that the brain evolved one layer on top, that, kind of the reptilian brain, then the emotional brain, and then the thinking, cortex, right? And it just made sense. Oh no, that was my lizard brain, kicking in, or that's just my emotional brain. I need to, jump into my cortex to, to tame it, to tame that animal, that reptile. And it felt true, and we liked it, and it was simple. And those of us that teach, it was totally the simplest model of the evolution of the brain. And it was hard to fucking let go of. But I am a fan of Lisa Feldman Barrett. And if you don't know who that is, just look up her book, How Emotions Are Made, or what was it, 7.5 lessons of the brain, or something like that. But her work is pretty fucking amazing. And she went out on a limb initially, and people were like, no, don't fuck with our theory. We're comfortable. It makes sense. Anyway, I've been a fan of her work for a few years, so I've had some time to to get used to the loss of that model that years ago I used to teach as well, and really it's far more interesting, in my opinion. It's far more intriguing and interesting, and for change workers, it really allows us to be a bit more creative than the simplistic view of that's just your, reptile talking. This is more understanding. I already mentioned the adaptive unconscious. Well, people are now theorizing this as like the adaptive brain, right? That it adapts and it's evolved. I mean, there's layers of emotional cortex in fish, even, some would, say. So, it just didn't evolve that way. It's more adaptive. It's more predictive. And this is the thing I've been teaching for many years about how to do therapeutic memory reconsolidation. Once you understand the predictive nature of the brain, especially as it relates to the predictive nature of memory, then everything changes. What you think you know, what you think you can do or not do, all of a sudden it opens up, and one of the big things that I've been hitting hard in my trainings is this idea of being able to, put in prediction errors in a very strategic way as to offer up, changes and neuroplasticity in the direction that we want to go in, right? How do we take the nature of the brain as we understand it now and play with it, and use it for change work that is faster and longer lasting and works on a more synaptic level, right? So I think for me, letting go of the triune brain was kind of vital in expanding to where I am now and where I imagine I'm going, understanding the predictive nature of the brain, the adaptive nature of the brain, the fact that these regions aren't just like dormant until we're emotional or, cognitive, the fact that they're interrelated and the brain works together, and it's more about networks, that are being utilized in many different ways. It's not just this region does this, that would be a waste in space and energy, and your brain does not like to waste energy because it is an energy consuming machine on many levels. So, anything that can be automated will be automated. Anything that, can be conserved will be conserved. And so prediction allows that, right? Our brain knows how to act today based on how it's acted yesterday, based on how it predicts you will act tomorrow. So once you kind of get that, it opens up a whole new world. So yes, RIP to the triune brain, but hello and welcome to the adaptive brain, which I feel is so much more exciting. And, it takes a little bit of, going through that period of, oh no, what do I think now? That period of uncertainty to learn something new. That's what I've been teaching for many, many years and had to feel it viscerally myself. You can't learn anything really new from certainty. And so that little destabilization that is kind of rippling across people in the field, in psychology and cognitive neuroscience and hypnosis and coaching, that dissonance as well as uncertainty will ultimately be good for learning something brand new. So let's end on a positive note, like, yay, we get to learn. Keep your questions coming because I'm thinking this is fun. Good morning. So I love this question, which is what experience helped shape your thinking about the malleability of mind? And, I can answer this in a bunch of different ways. I've always been interested in altered states. My sister and I were just talking about, spinning, as a 3 and 4 year old, just spinning to get dizzy and then laying down and, staring at the sky, or, progressing from that to like hyperventilating at age 4 or 5, because it would do something cool to my head. So, I could go all the way back, but really, as far as, what kind of really opened the field for me and, kind of installed a lifelong curiosity and search for, just the edges, the boundaries of what we can do, right? Was, and I've shared this elsewhere, but I'm going to share it here, was a mushroom trip in Central Park when I was about maybe 17 or 18. And I was with my rock and roll band, and I had this moment where I was it's funny because, again, as soon as I start talking about it, my fingers go into this they do this, which is me holding this blade of grass and, you know, and seeing that there was like this connection, this net that seemed to go from the grass through my body and then to the trees. And all I can say, and all I ever say about this, is I had this moment or two or three where I got it. I understood everything. I understood my place in the universe, how it was all connected, and I got it. That's all I could say. And then it was gone. And then I spent the rest of my life trying to get back what I knew in that moment. And, you know, through every kind of psychedelic drug you can imagine to, you know, how do we do it without the drug? I mean, if my brain can do this, if my brain can change the nature of reality to such an extent, then there must be obviously capabilities inherent in the brain. So it started me on that path of kind of looking for, you know, understanding how the receptors, you know, bind to certain things and how certain things trigger other things. And then led me to the Monroe Institute and how can I synchronize my brain and have these very bizarre altered states of consciousness without the drugs. And I mean, it really was that trip when I think back, even though I could share many experiences where, you know, you fully understand that we are creating our reality every single moment, you know, that all we are getting, you know, of the visual universe that we think we just look out of the, you know, our eyes and see, and then you realize that your brain is concocting it. It's making it up. It's making the shit up based on, you know, photons hitting certain areas and then flipping it to certain areas in the brain, and then your brain cobbles it together very rapidly and creates this version of reality. And then it makes it up, you know, it fills in all the gaps in your, you know, blind spots, and it just likes cohesion. It likes a complete narrative, but it's making it up. Same with your ears, same with everything. So once you really start to understand that, you know, it shakes what you think of as reality. You realize just how creative it all is in the moment. So the malleability of mind, I mean, to me is the most fascinating aspect of our, you know, reality tunnels that we create. So this kind of easily segues into the other question, which is, tell us more about hypnopsychedelics, which is, you know, my way of kind of cobbling together all of the things I'm fascinated with and have been doing over the past 25 years and seeing how I can apply it in ways that will mimic this kind of moment of, you know, understanding of epiphany, of what psychedelic researchers would call this oceanic boundlessness of consciousness. You know, in my classes on hypnopsychedelics, you know, we're not necessarily going through the geometric shapes and all of that cool shit. And even though a lot of people do experience that, what I'm really going for is what's beyond it. What are the effects of a therapeutic psychedelic experience that people report, and how can we mimic that? How can we spur it on? As well as how can we take previous psychedelic experiences that people have that are kind of compartmentalized and not integrated in a way that gives them that everyday awareness, right? I mean, if I could only hang on to that sense of knowing, that sense of interconnectedness in those moments where I'm fucking pissed off at you know, at the news, life would be different. So anyway, you know, that's kind of what I'm going for, and that's what drives me. You know, I always say that I remain in this field because there's no cap on it, because there's no, gee, I've learned everything there is to know about hypnosis or consciousness or the brain or the mind. We don't even know what the mind is really. So, you know, to me, I love that, and that's what keeps me going. You know, that curiosity. Anyway, thanks for those questions, and keep them coming. Have a great day. Hey everyone, so this is Ask Me Anything, and I love this question, which is basically, can hypnosis help people who are doing shadow work or healing from shame and things like that? It was prefaced with, does it go beyond the weight loss and habit control protocols that they were given in their hypnosis training? So yes, a big resounding yes. And, I think it's worth talking a little bit about, hypnosis, the frame as I frame it, right? Because my hypnosis is very integrative. It pulls from all different modalities, and it's very different than the old school kind of authoritative, close your eyes and let me read you a fucking script, that kind of thing. I don't do that. So the kind of trance work that I do pretty much is allowing more emergent, organic knowings from the individual, right? I create this space. I might ask certain questions that will lead consciousness in different directions. But basically the answers really are drawn out from the client. So when dealing with the harder emotions, the shame, the what people are calling shadow work, I don't call it that. I just call it you, right? Like, you are multifaceted. You have all of these different emotions, and, we are complex. And so kind of just looking at it as a whole, these things are always at play, right? There's no separate work in my world that is shadow work, because almost everything that I do, even if someone is saying, look, I got this presentation I need to do, Monday, can you help me? Right? So even though the focus of the work this day is on getting you feeling congruent and confident and knocking it out of the park, right? So I'm going to be invoking the emotional states the client requests, right? Not the kind of confidence I think they should have, but what they want. And then I'm going to be pasting that to where they need it. And that is feels to a lot of the practitioners I train, because I've been training therapists and psychiatrists for many years. So even though it feels on a superficial level, the truth is that all of these are connected to that early emotional prime, right? This shadow work, or these darker emotions, the shame, manifests in behavioral patterns, manifests in limiting beliefs, manifests in all these different issues that our clients come in with. So nothing is, in a separate container. Everything has its neuroassociative kind of clustering around something from the early sensitizing experience. Could be as early as your emotional, your attachment style, because the way that experience is built starts with early sensory experience in the brain. And, this is a much broader conversation. Trust me, I am answering the question. But these neural networks kind of branch out, and then it includes all of this other stuff. But the truth is, when you affect change, all right, if I'm helping that person to get up in front of, that boardroom, confidently and do this amazing presentation, then that trickles down to the belief about self that I can't do it, that I can't be confident, that I don't have the self-esteem it takes to get up there and speak my mind. All of these start to get a little destabilized because, you've just defied a prediction error in the brain. The prediction is, I'm going to panic because every time I even imagine getting up in front of a group, I panic. And all of a sudden we thwart that prediction error. The brain has to make adjustments. And those adjustments are wide-reaching, right? So that it really affects every layer. Now, specifically, so in other words, I think all work is on some level shadow work when it comes organically from the individual. This is why I've never been a fan of giving scripts to people to read. They're scripts written by someone else, and just it doesn't apply. It's external, right? It's an external agent influencing internally, and I don't do that kind of work. So almost all of my work is inner focused. Now, when these emotions come up, because I do integrative work, I can pull from a whole host of strategies for how to deal with these emotional states, right? Some more somatic than others. Hypnosis can be a great way of just kind of opening the door to people's inner knowing, right? To opening the door in a very safe way to have them review the whole history of this issue, right? The implications of the issue from a safe space, right? Sometimes I guide people to their own inner, wisdom, where they can kind of get clarity around this feeling. Sometimes it's a very physical expression of the negative emotional state. So there's so many different ways to work. Once you kind of expand your frame of what hypnosis is and isn't, right? To me, it's a much wider anything that helps people to shift, change their unconscious patterns. And that's patterns of doing, patterns of feeling, patterns of being, and to create space for that to happen organically. So yeah, fuck yeah, this really is useful for all that kind of work. Hope that answered the question, maybe a little too much, but keep them coming, folks. This gives me some good stuff to react to, and that makes it all easy. So have a good one. Hey everyone, so another Ask Me Anything. This question is about pattern interrupts, and somebody asked, is it enough to do pattern interrupts like bilateral stimulation once, or, how much time is needed in order to start to change a habit? So, there's a few ways to answer this. Well, the first one is repetition matters here, right? Neurons that fire together wire together. So if we are doing a kind of counteractive, self-directed neuroplasticity, which, if you know my work, is typically the first layer of my work, which is arm clients with the ability to change their own brain. In which case, the way that I typically describe it, and I'm sure have described it in other videos, I do my Change in a New York Minute, where I give a bunch of these pattern interrupts. But for those of you that haven't seen that, I typically imagine any habit, right? Any unconscious habituated pattern of feeling or thinking or being to be like, going down a well-worn road. And what the pattern interrupts are designed to do in this frame, in this format, right? The self-directed neuroplasticity is you're going down the road, you use a pattern interrupt to block, right? To do a roadblock that then kind of forces the brain to detour. Now, through repetition, you start creating other neural connections and networks, right? So repetition counts here if you're using the pattern interrupts in this way. Now, the difference is, and that would be considered counteractive neuroplasticity, meaning you're creating counter roadways, right? And we want them to be easy and simple and robust so that it's a no-brainer that we take the counter roadway. And that's how a lot of people work. That's how a lot of cognitive behavioral therapists work. And, and it's a good solid thing. In my work, that's just the first layer. The second layer is more interesting personally to me in a way of using the pattern interrupts as ways of interrupting a crucial pattern once you've activated, let's say, a memory or a neural network, and you do that crucial thing that has the effect of thwarting or creating a prediction error in the brain. And that is where the interesting stuff happens. That's where we can be strategic in utilizing therapeutic memory reconsolidation. And that is a very different kind of neuroplasticity in that it doesn't offer a counter roadway. It rewrites the old emotional primes that keep that habit together. So there's two different ways of thinking about it. But repetition, if you're looking to change a habit on your own, repetition counts. And I would say, if you watch a bunch of the Change in a New York Minute and gather, a few different ways to interrupt the pattern so that you're also getting a little dopamine hit because there's novelty there and curiosity there, because most things, we're human and we get habituated to something. We kind of get acclimated to it. So that's why I always teach my clients a bunch of different pattern interrupts so that we still get, a little bit of the novelty there. So I hope that answered you. Repetition, 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 unless you're using it in the coaching moment to, more strategically. And that's a whole different video. All right. Thanks, guys. Keep the questions coming. All right. Back with another Ask Me Anything. This question was about someone who had a driving phobia, basically driving anxiety, from a traumatic event. And I don't know what that event was, probably a crash or, a near miss or something like that, typically in my experience. And I've worked with this type of anxiety and phobias for over 20 years at this point. And they asked about exposure therapy, right? That seems to be the therapy of choice for the more traditional modes of therapeutic interventions. And here's my thoughts on exposure therapy, right? If it's done correctly, then it can really work well. And when I mean correctly, I mean not in the way that most people do it. The way that I would do it. And one of the things I want to make very clear, when people say, would hypnosis be good for this? Would hypnosis be good for that? Traditional hypnosis, in my opinion, has a lot more limitations than what I would call my form of hypnosis, which is basically change work that pulls from a bunch of different modalities. It's integrative in many different ways. So I want to start off by saying that, right? In other words, if you go to a more traditionally minded hypnotist for driving phobia, depending on the hypnotist and their school of thinking around these types of things, it might be effective, it might not. The first thing I would do is I would take whatever emotions arise from thinking about, first of all, the past traumatic event, and do something to scramble it a little bit in the brain, right? Do something to take the edge off, right? So I would access just a little bit of it in just talking to them, right? So that I would then either do some tapping techniques, some, bilateral stimulation, EMDR will work, full-on dissociation, and then finding a better feeling state. See, this is the key that a lot of exposure therapy kind of gets wrong. They just kind of white knuckle it, right? You're going to just, you're just going to expose them to a little bit and a little bit and a little bit of the stimulus, and then they'll just kind of get acclimated to it. That can be quite torturous for the person involved. And it can work, but it can be torturous. And it can also not work and re-traumatize or make the phobia even more steadfast. So in my experience, the key is to neutralize, the traumatic moment memory that is tripping them up. And we have 100 ways to do that. And then we find, how do you want to feel instead, right? What's it like? Now, this is where hypnosis is really good, because we can get into a state where they feel absolutely focused and calm, whatever kind of perfect state they want to be in order to drive relaxed but focused, careful and focused, right? And so we get them into that state, and then we have them imagine getting in the car. We get them into that state and imagine getting, them into the car. So the key here is we utilize hypnosis rather than actual exposure to them getting into a car where they could potentially hurt themselves or others, we take the edge off by doing a more hypnotic exposure. And we do it only when we have the more positive body state, right? So that they can then, practice being in a state of absolute comfort and confidence as they imagine driving. And this starts to neutralize some of that negative stuff. And if done correctly, the way that, you're going to make sure that you kind of activate, the memory and throw in that prediction error by having them feel totally calm and focused while they're imagining driving, and then rehearse, then you're really going to get them into a state that by the time they get behind the car, they have, already mentally been rehearsing it countless times. And each time they do, they're in a very calm, relaxed state. Quite often, I'll use the trick of and you've driven, you're getting out, and it was great. So I go to the end of the car ride, the end of the journey, and milk some of that good stuff to bring it back to the front end and sit in the car and drive. So, it's kind of a looping process, and I do it from various degrees of trance so that, we've got many different inroads in to the neural network. That's just my way of thinking around it. And I hope that helps. So to answer your question, the short answer is yes, hypnosis can help. Welcome to New York City. And by that, I mean a variety of hypnotic tools can help. Anyway, thanks for asking, and, keep them coming.